Hey all. We at Evanston Rules did our first live podcast event on YouTube. We were lucky to kick off Evanston Township High School's Booster Club's first ever virtual fundraiser, Boosterpalooza. Michael, Ron, and I are so grateful to have spoken with members of SOAR, Students Organized Against Racism, for this necessary and real conversation. We were blown away by the brightest of life TaRhonda Woods, an engaged and revered SOAR facilitator and teacher at ETHS. All reasons to support ETHS. Please join in and support the important work that SOAR and other student organizations are doing at ETHS by making a donation to help support these important programs. Please go to the link in our website to contribute. Anything helps. ETHS, we will fight for you. We skipped the hellos, so take a listen and look at this special episode. Let's dive right in.
We're just asking for folks on both ends, rather whatever your racial identity is, to step into these conversations and really recognize that you must have courage to have this type of dialogue, and that recognizing that this type of dialogue is imperative for us to advance in any type of way, as we're thinking about in education, in our personal lives, and whatever. We must be courageous in having these types of conversations.
Well, go ahead, Ron. Well, let me say one threading the needle statement. I think it's so important that in a masked up environment, right, that we unmask ourselves.
Yep.
Because what you just said essentially is you can't get the truth without vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
You have to create space for people to have a conversation, and we have to take the masks off. Yep. Yeah. So thank you very much, Ron.
So Miss Dr. Woods, how do you, in the middle of having those courageous conversations, not only help people unmask their fears, but get past their fears, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm talking to white folk about whiteness, or when I'm talking to black folk about institutional racism,
yeah,
right? I mean, that sometimes is a sticky piece. So how do you get people to not be afraid of truth and different perspective?
Oh, that's the $1 billion question, right?
Right.
So I think just truly one of the things that I always preference when I'm having these types of conversations, especially when it's a conversation that is greatly needed. I think that the kids really do give me courage to really think about having these conversations. When you're giving agency or invoking agency into kids, right, have these types of conversations, and they're having them, and they're asking for the resources to have these dialogue, for incidents that happens in their classes, or, in spaces with adults, at ETHS or within the context of their own homes, them having the courage to do that, and then coming back and dialoguing about it and having, these debriefs about it really does give me the strength to have these types of conversations. Right. So when I'm having these conversations, a little bit of my strength comes from them, and my experiences with them. And then, just truly being unapologetic in these types of conversations. I always preference that, I'm going to be truly, authentic and unapologetic in addressing, what if it was an incident or something that is happening. So I think that truly, recognizing that there is some power, that I do hold some power outside of, all of these, limitations I have because of my race or because of parts of my identity. But I think truly, like, embracing that I am here to push against these systems, and if I don't do it, who's going to do it? So,
I think the most difficult thing in a difficult conversation is not having it.
Yeah. And I think too, recognizing that, individuals' humanity, because at the end of the day, we're having conversations with humans, and I think that truly centering my conversation and recognizing that I am dialoguing with another human, regardless of their racial identity, regardless of the identities that they hold, but truly holding them accountable as humans. Like, we are engaging in this conversation that must be happening because, Black identity, Black humanity is not being recognized. So making that the basis of my conversation truly is how I push forward.
So truth, important, necessary.
Yes.
Another word you mentioned, necessary. They don't always meet.
No, they don't.
And we've got kids who are out there and pushing, and I really believe they're the future and will make the changes that we've been waiting for.
Yes.
How do you work with the kids, and how do they work with you to combine humanity and honesty?
So I guess like just to give some background and historical context to SOAR, so SOAR started in around 2012, 2013. It was an extension of the district's equity work for, it was facilitated initially by adults. They were trying to create space for students to have a voice in pushing against this work and have a place in this work. I wasn't a part of the early iterations of SOAR, but I know that it was very adult-centered. I think that although it was focused on creating space for students, around 2013, 2014, that is when there was the first iteration of the SOAR student leadership. And there was 10 students that facilitated having these types of conversations, creating spaces to have these type of conversations, and committees that would push in different avenues in the context of ETHS. So just giving that as the context, I think that, now we have a board of 43 students, so these students really do run the show. Like when I tell y'all, it's not the adults in that space. We are really focusing on decentering the adultism and creating space. I think people underestimate the work that kids can do. Like these kids are having these revolutionary, liberating conversations and creating these spaces on their own. Yes, we guide them and facilitate them, but a lot of the work they're doing, so they're creating these spaces in their community. They're thinking about things and issues to address in certain classes. They're thinking about the ways in which who's in which classes in ETHS and how to disrupt that. They're thinking about creating spaces for students to have, a space for their humanity and recognize that different racial identities have been oppressed, and creating ways in which they can create spaces for that oppression, to dismantle that oppression, especially as it exists in ETHS.
So with all that wonderful work and empowering young people to have a voice and to be able to stand and challenge the status quo, there's still a system.
Yeah.
And there's still a system that's often rooted in race and socioeconomic status. So as an educator, right, how is this conversation being had with the adults to be accepting of the kids that are challenging institutionalism, right? I mean, what does that look like in the adult conversation when the kids may not be there?
So one of the things that I will say about the work that is happening at ETHS, it is something that I have not witnessed or heard of or seen in the context of educational spaces. So their equity work, their district equity initiatives are truly something that I think it has catalyzed what we see in terms of like a change in how race and racial relations and social political conversations are happening in the context of school.
Yeah.
So I think that, through, beyond diversity trainings, through, these social conscious, I'm using the word summits that we have, through these different, avenues in which teachers and adults are having these conversations. I think that, are they perfect? Absolutely not.
Right.
And if they were perfect, I don't think we would have to continue to talk about race,
Right.
Do they, have they completely disrupt the ways in which we see white supremacy impacts educational systems and policies and things? Absolutely, in some ways, yes, but holistically, absolutely not. But I think that it does create a platform for us to at least have the conversations that need to have, and to, stand these, face these issues right in the face. Like white supremacy is real, systematic oppression is real, institutional racism exists, and is very prevalent, and it persists in educational spaces, unfortunately. But I think that having these types of conversations and creating platforms where these conversations and the culture that these conversations are going to happen, I think disrupts at least that narrative that we're going to be silent about it.
Right. I mean, and I think we can agree, institutional racism isn't learned, it's taught. Right. And it's taught in homes, and it's taught in institutions, places called school, right? I cannot wait to get the students on the phone because I'm so excited to hear what they will say about how these conversations about race go to my home. I mean, my home has to say more than, hey, you know I got Black friends, right? That seems to be often the status quo. Well, do you have Black friends that sit at your dinner table?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you have Black friends that you go to their house and have dinner as well?
Yeah.
Right. So I can't wait to hear how the students feel or say, or what they say about how those conversations happen at home as well.
That'd be awesome.
What are you hearing? What are you hearing from students as they challenge their parents to think differently?
So one of the great, I think the beautiful things about SOAR is that, you know, although these conversations, and we do talk about having these conversations in their homes, I mean, in their communities and in context of ETHS, they do happen in their homes. So there is dialogue. One of the things that we really, you know, talk about is that critical reflection piece. You know, that is a great, you know, that critical conscious reflection piece is a great part of being a member in SOAR. So although, yes, we are, you know, we always talk about this idea of, you know, wokeness, quote unquote, you know, and in the context of, you know, SOAR, what we start to see is that as we're not just the police of wokeness, you know, we don't just decide who is there. We're all in a journey doing this work. We're all in different places in our journey, and we're all pushing each other to be critical about where we are and to push against what we're seeing, and even in the context of if it's in school or in our home. So what I'm starting to see is that, you know, these students are having these conversations at home, and they are asking, you know, for advice on how to lead these conversations in their house, especially for white identifying students that are a member of SOAR. So one thing about SOAR is that SOAR is just not particularly for only students of color, because we feel we've created space that, you know, white students, white identifying individuals have to do this work too. It's not just, you know, on the backs of students of color and people of color to constantly have to do this work.
Do you ever worry about your job speaking up so honestly?
We got covered.
One of the reasons I became an educator, I'm more of a, I guess you can say I'm kind of a career direction changer. Just being a scientist like that, it was never my goal to go into education initially. I think that as my life has unfolded and the ways in which I've seen, you know, and have experienced oppression for myself in the education system, and how I had to navigate, you know, in very white spaces, and how I had to recognize the ways in which institutional racism has directly impacted my life, it has become my life goal to really work to, and I know I'm not going to see this in my lifetime, but I think to be a part of this beautiful struggle to really cause a shift to happen, particularly for students of color to experience school and learning in a very different way. I think that when we just limit learning to spaces in school, we see the way schools can inflict trauma, particularly on Black and brown students. And I think that for me, creating spaces and creating, you know, these types of dialogues and engaging these types of dialogues are imperative to my practice as an educator. I cannot be an educator without having these types of conversations. So to answer your question, I think if I can't do this work being true and being authentic to who I am, I don't know. So I can't say that I'm worried about it. I can't say I'm not worried about it, but my true focus is really the kids and really creating spaces where kids do not have to experience racial trauma in school.
I would just say quickly to our white family and colleagues too, I think this is about creating space, and invitation and being vulnerable is for you too. And what we all got to do is get in, right? You got to get in, because the only way we get back to a world where there's a quality education will be when we all believe that there needs to be quality education for all. So that's where the liberation comes from.
Mike, your shoulder is hitting your mic.
Hitting the mic.
Laurice, I think you had a question. Yeah.
So,
The great thing about a live podcast.
So, you know, we talk about Evanston. We talk about the wonderful pieces of Evanston. We talk about the liberal. We talk about the inclusion. We talk about the Kumbaya, the history of Martin Luther King coming, the history of Cesar Chavez coming. We talk about kids growing up hand in hand, different races, different ethnicities, different, financial situations within the home, single parents, kids being bused. But, so we have all these good feelings about it. And we find often that by the time these kids get to high school, it's a different story. Now, I understand that SOAR is doing a lot of great work. How many members are there in SOAR?
So currently we have 43 students on the leadership board. This is the largest board we've ever had. And I think that one of the things that we try to have conversations about in SOAR is that it's not just a space for the leadership board. So we have open invitations for all students to be a part of doing this work. I think the leadership board just is responsible for facilitating these conversations and setting up the logistical pieces for these things. But for the most part, SOAR is a space for all students to engage in these types of dialogue and conversations.
So when you say all students, Evanston Township High School has how many students right now? What is
we're at about 3,500.
So there are 43 or so kids. How do they spread the message of SOAR throughout the school? And doesn't it seem that it would be just an awesome practice to really be able to get more kids into SOAR? Because it seems that the kids who are involved are driven, are interested, have homes that possibly support.
Yeah.
What about those kids that don't have that?
Yes. So there's two-part answer to that question. For the first part, I think that what SOAR really does is it creates these experiences for students to have these types of dialogue. So the first experience is a 2-part student design conference that happens over 2 days at Northwestern. So we have on average, we have about 200 to 250 students that do sign up to come to these conferences. And these conferences are student-led, student design, and the students really engage the participants in having these types of conversations, giving them resources to, have these conversations outside of just this conference. So I think that really does, open the platform for these type of conversations to happen outside of just being in part of the leadership board. The students also do something called equity workshops where they go into different spaces. So these are different student athletic groups. These are different spaces in students' clubs. So they actually lead these types of workshops in spaces. And particularly what ends up happening is they do happen to occur more frequently in groups that are predominantly white, like where the student body that take parts in these organizations or these clubs are usually white. So I think that really does open the platform for these types of students to have this type of dialogue and conversations. And then the second part is that answer to this question is that, when we start to think about involving 3,500 students in these types of conversations, it gets really tricky, and it does, we do have conversations in SOAR about access, because, when we start to think about this work, it does come down to people who have the vocabulary, individuals who know how to talk, the individuals who know how to walk, So when we start to create these spaces, what SOAR really has tried to do is to open the platform and open the door for all students to have this type of conversations, and recognizing that, different students are in different parts of their journey, and owning that and creating space for those people as well.
Right. So it's important, obviously, that people be able to use their voices, that we not penalize people for having voices or being able to walk the walk, and knowing that we are in different spaces of growth.
Yeah, but also grounding that in a critical reflection, and also grounding that in critical conversations, and making sure that we are centering race. We do recognize that whiteness is prevalent, and that whiteness does, invoke oppression on people of color in particular. So making sure that those are grounded in as we have these type of conversations and create these spaces.
So do any of these, so you're saying that they go out and have these conversations. Do these leaders, what is it? As you teach one, as you learn, you bring one, you teach one, each one.
Yeah.
you know, there's such an opportunity to mentor. And I get the reality of a high school experience is a very busy one. I'm sure these kids are going. I always have a concern for those who are left behind.
Yeah.
And what I find is that by the time kids get to high school, some are identified just as not those children.
Yeah.
And what is a way to be able to expand that with?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think I can speak to my own like personal experience. I teach two very different biology classes at ETHS. One is Earn Honors, which is introductory biology course for all, all incoming freshmen, while we do have a population of students that have to wait until their sophomore year to take biology, which particularly becomes Black and Brown students due to different testing reasons and literacy reasons. So I think that for me, I think that when it comes down to creating space for students whose voice have been left out of these conversations, I think that it's very important for us as an educational system to create spaces that transcend just one student organization or transcend just one adult. I think that by creating a culture that really does center Black and Brown students and really does center integrating racism, I think that this is how we reach all of these individuals that have been left out until the culture, exceeds beyond just individual spaces, until we do the work where it really does capture that we are going to center Black voices, we are going to center Brown voices, and we are going to make sure that we center that, white supremacy is a thing and it needs to be dismantled. Until we do that, I think that, there are going to be people that are unfortunately left out of these dialogue and out of these conversations. But I think that what SOAR does is it allows the voice to happen outside of it just being on like ownership on the adults, because we know how adults can take ownership of things and how adults can, I always talk about, adults, I can do with the kids. Adults, sometimes I'm like, I don't know, but I think that by having, them having these types of conversations in their friend groups, having these conversations on social media, having these conversations that transcends these spaces that adults need to, like, I need to have ownership and facilitate all the time. I think that is how we meet. That is how we create culture to meet all students that have been left out.
So I have another scary question to ask.
You with these scary questions.
Right. And when we talk about adults, America has never admitted the atrocities of slavery. They've never apologized. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about white supremacy and institutional racism, right? Mm-hmm. In a place like Evanston that's so target rich for this kind of success, how do we get white folk to admit that there's institutional racism? First question. Mm-hmm. Okay. The second question is, the scary piece of whiteness is having to share or give up my power structure based on cognitive dissonance. Mm-hmm. So now, in that adult space, how do we get white folk to share? How do we get white folk to admit institutional racism? And how do Black folk feel comfortable saying that? I was trying to model.
And after this, I want your answer, and we're going to now. But then we've got kids who are excited to join us. Okay. So I'm not telling you to abbreviate it because it's an awesome question.
No, please, because I know what she's gonna say.
What I'm gonna say? What I'm gonna say?
The truth.
I'm not. I like to be like quite frank. I can't tell you exactly what the answer to that question is. And okay. I think that if I knew the answer to that question, and I think if we knew the answer to that question, we wouldn't be having this types of conversations. It wouldn't be the need for us to have this podcast this morning, So I think that when we start to really think about what it truly is going to take for, and I'm not even sure if I believe that an apology is going to suffice, at this point. I do think that there's definitely a need for recognition. There's definitely a need for ownership. There's definitely a need in a space for individual and personal reflection. And I think that some white folks are just not in a place to do that, and I can't say that all folks are going to be able to have these types of conversations in their lifetime. But I think that it is important for us to really stay true to this struggle and really recognize that, there is place for this struggle and there is necessity for this struggle, and that we just have to keep raising our voices and using the, as I keep advancing, and, I hate to use, this very Americanized white way of thinking. As I keep advancing academically, I think one of my goals is to really create, every person that's in the space with me is going to have this type of conversation. Awesome. Every person who is in these platforms with me I'm going to disrupt in this way, and not in a way that it's punitive, but in a way that we must have these conversations in order to liberate and to center Black joy, and to push for, a way in which we can see that and recognize that race is prevalent in this country and it does oppress.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we must. Well, I'm going to take a quick pause, but one moment I want to remind, because though this is an important conversation, we are also raising funds for ETHS, for Boosterpalooza. And so I'm going to remind people to text Boosterpalooza, and that's BOOSTERPALOOZA. Text that to 76728 to donate. 76728 to donate. Now, I also want to get to the piece that we certainly want to discuss the idea of how important it is for us to be us and to let people know and to bring ourselves with us, because for so long, people have felt the need to be quiet or to be punished. Mm-hmm. We also have to look within our own community and talk about the support that we offer ourselves, correct?
Yes.
But what we're going to do right now is take a moment. We've got our 4 students, our 4 SOAR students, and we're going to bring them on one by one. I'm going to start with Leanna Wallace, who's coming on.
Hey, Ms. Woods, I would say thank you very much for who you are, for bringing the truth today, for equipping students, and to our ETHS alum that are out there. One way that you can help is that our boosters has also expanded what they will fund and support. And so that you will not just be funding, sort of the traditional activities that you may have been aware of, but SOAR is one of those activities. So what you can do is the $600 we've raised so far during this podcast, triple up and quadruple that number so that we can support our students. Yeah, and Ms. Woods, thank you very much for equipping everybody. That shared sacrifice is very important.
You are 100% a champion. Thank you for being unafraid to speak your truth. Yeah. And it's time to share, audience. So please share.
And Ms. Woods, TaRhonda is going to be staying with us. We have welcomed Leanna Wallace. Hello, Leanna. Good morning.
Hey.
Hi, Leanna. Hey.
How are you?
Fantastic. How are you?
Good. Doing good.
Awesome.
We're now going to bring on Nora Miller.
And we know Nora Miller. We got history with Nora Miller.
I think we kind of know all of these people. There are people.
Welcome, Nora. Hello.
Nice.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Working on that Tesla with your uncle for you.
I'm next going to bring on Carmia. Let's see. Carmia. Here we are. Hello, Carmia. Nice to see you again. Thank you.
Carmia.
And last and certainly not least, we've got Kayla. And I'm feeling very much like the melanated Brady Bunch.
Ron, I think we can just acknowledge, right, that this is in the Wakanda Nation, the sisters rule, man.
Here we go. do it.
In Marge Whitmore's house, that was evident. I learned that 57 years ago.
So, Liana, let's start with you. Liana, you are an ETHS grad. You're now second year sophomore at Georgetown.
Yes, yes.
And then we can go deeper into it, and Nora, you're a senior. And as we did say, Ron and I graduated with your dad. It's awesome.
Right.
Your dad is David?
My dad is
Mark.
Mark.
Michael graduated with Mark.
Right. Carmia, you're at American. And
No, I'm actually just a senior at ETHS.
Oh, you're a senior at ETHS.
Yep.
I'm at American.
Sorry, Kayla.
That's okay.
The Hoopers at American.
Right. So, Liana, tell us a little bit about the program. When did you join?
Yeah, so SOAR is a program that started, I think, like 2-3 years before I joined it by some older Black men, actually, that, were Corey Winchester's students. And so I joined my sophomore year. My freshman year, I attended one conference and I was like, this is amazing. I need to be a part of this. And it was just very similar to conversations that I had like during Thanksgiving with my family, conversations that we were having all the time. And so it just felt like home. And at the time I joined, there was really amazing, just other Black women on the board, like Camille Allen, she's a graduate of Barnard, just so many other amazing people. And they just kind of really helped me grow into myself as a Black woman. So it just felt very much so like home. And so I joined sophomore year and just so much came of that, and just did so much work within the Evanston community. It taught me about agency, organizing, everything I learned from SOAR I carry with me to this day. So it is just like a precious thing beyond words. I absolutely love SOAR.
One quick thing.
Larice, we can't hear you.
You were kind of can you hear me now? Is it better now?
Yeah.
You are a legacy, right? In this program, your brother was one of the first members.
Yeah, I guess you could say it like that. It's kind of funny to say it like that. Yeah, but I never thought about it like that. I think, yeah, in a way, yes. But I feel like a lot of the people that come through SOAR, it tends to be a legacy because it is very much so like family. So I feel like, all of these other young women, they're like my sisters that are still on that board. So it's all a legacy, yeah.
Awesome. Nora? I'm going to go with Kayla. We're going to go with our college gals first. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in SOAR. And then
similar to Liana, I didn't go to a conference first. I knew Miss Woods. Miss Woods, my freshman biology teacher. I always saw Mr. Winchester around, and we started having conversation. And I think before I got on the board, I was connecting with Liana and some other folks who were on the board, and it was just kind of getting involved that way. And more than anything, I love the work that was being done, but I love the people, like just the community aspect of it and like the love that was surrounding it. So my senior year, I joined the SOAR board as well. And the same thing happened. The people around were just full of love, and we got things done together. And that's kind of my journey with SOAR.
Nora?
Kind of like Liana, I have a sibling who is also in SOAR. My sibling is 1 year older than me. So they're in New York right now at NYU. But I kind of saw Gray go through SOAR my freshman year and sophomore year. And so my junior year, I also applied for board and, was amazed by the community and just the work that we do and how it impacts ETHS. So.
Carmia, you're a senior
Yes,
as well.
so
correct?
yes, I am. My first
Before you go,
SOAR.
you get closer to the mic. I know that's been a problem for me as well.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Sure, yeah. Let's try getting as close as you can to the source.
And
Okay.
I've got to, just if I could, Miss Woods, you are grinning from ear to ear. So you know that as an educator, when you are so connected to your people, you sit back and watch them and that love just resonates in your eyes.
I just love them.
So she's like the proud mother watching you guys.
I think that for me, it's just like when you see like just such beauty, and not even like in a physical sense, like just beautiful people doing this work.
Right.
It just speaks to my soul. So I just love them. So that's why I just can't. I know my cheeks gonna be hurting by the time I'm done, but I just can't.
My colleague always says soul has no color. And my question is, you gotta first know people have soul. These people have soul.
These people got soul.
I don't want to lose time.
Yeah.
I want to hear a little.
Let me do a little quick shout out, because I think we're at $1,000 to our ETHS alum. You have helped us get that moving. What I would say is, don't forget, you have to text to 76278. 76278 Boosterpalooza. Before we get started, for these young ladies, make sure that more young ladies have an opportunity to do this. Raise some money for us. We should be able to hit at least double that number before we get off. Okay.
And so, Carmia.
Yes. Can you hear me now better?
Much better.
Okay. So the first SOAR conference I actually went to was in 8th grade. I think I was chosen, I don't know, I went to King Lab K through 8, all my years of school until I got to the high school. And I was like, my eyes were wide open the entire time. It was crazy. I was like, what is this? And so, and I was also really busy, so I never was on the board, but I always went to the conference. I think sophomore year, or maybe freshman year, I didn't go because I don't know, I had something, but every year I've been like, always had like that question in my soul, like, how do I further like these conversations and how can I get more involved? And I never really questioned like, oh, like, can I be on SOAR board until senior year, when I really like saw a lot of my peers there, and I was like, okay, now it's time for me to get involved. So after last year going to both conferences, I was like, okay, I want to do this, and now I'm in it, and it's so like, it's beautiful because you're sitting here having these conversations that you're meant to have in like a space with other people that want to have them. And so it's really, I don't know, it's just something that's really special that I know everyone here was like, I got to involve myself in it.
Conversations you were meant to have.
True.
Can you peel that back for me a little bit more?
Yeah. So I think that in regards to like how we identify ourselves, it's really important to have conversations about that. And I don't think the meaning of being human is to get a job and get money and have a family and do that. I think the meaning of being human is to interact with other humans and to explore other people's experiences. And that has a lot to do with race and how you identify. And so having those conversations that we have in SOAR, like, it's all about identity. It's all about understanding someone else's place in life and understanding your relativity to that. And so, and that's the most important thing to me, is just understanding where someone else is coming from and being able to relate to them on that level.
Well, it's interesting to bring up success. I know that Mike and Ron and I've been included in conversations defining success. What is that for any of you? Anyone?
I feel like,
go ahead, Nora.
Okay. The first thing I thought of, or the first like synonym to success that I thought of was joy. And I feel like, at least in my short life, how I measure how like successful I am isn't by, whatever grades or how some other of my peers do measure that. It is really by the relationships I have and, my emotions and the feelings that I'm having and the connections I make with other people.
So I want to, the rabbit hole has been opened up. So let's just go down it. having the conversations that I'm meant to have, the joy of being who I am. Where are the white kids? And what does that conversation look like with white kids?
Yeah, I think something that I learned throughout my time at SOAR is the importance of centering Black voices and Black people, right? And so within the context of ETHS, a lot of people like to talk about diversity. We have these white kids, we have these Black kids, but as you're walking through these hallways, as soon as you walk into an AP classroom, that diversity seems to go away. We have, essentially gentrification within a high school building. And so I think something that I learned that was so valuable to me is that, yes, we would spend these times, I think a little bit too much time in our conferences at Northwestern, maybe, talking about white folks and being like, yeah, like y'all really shouldn't be saying the N-word, and yeah, y'all really shouldn't be microaggressing people, which is all true. But as in my social location as a Black woman, how I define success is through Black liberation. And so I found so much more liberation and freedom in talking to other Black people and just working through kind of decolonizing our minds instead of focusing on white folks. Because I have one of my best friends, Julia, she's white, and I'm like, this is your job to get your white people together. Go ahead, do that. And my job is to kind of, for Nora, Kayla, Carmia, let's talk about the trauma that we've been through as Black women and how we continue on creating that success. So it's been, I think that's an interesting that you raised that question, right? Because for me, it's been, white people have a journey that they have to go on, but that's not to say that, racism and them undoing that is our job to do. It's very much so theirs to do. And I've been really proud of a lot of the white folks that have stepped up and taken on that responsibility, because it isn't ours to do, right? It's exhausting for us to do.
So let me ask a deeper question, because I'm agreeing with you. I think that we really need to have our voice and fix it ourselves, right? But so what does that look like in the Black space, in the Black conversation, right? And then even in that conversation, we still have to deal with the reality of how institutions are set up and who they're run by, right? So when we have the Black space that we're trying to fix, what does that look like in dialogue? And then how do we take it to the folk that are controlling the systematic oppression and the trauma that we've experienced for 400 years? What does that look like?
So I think when I say like centering Black voices, right, we do have these power structures and white people tend to be at the very top of those power structures. But what I found, and this is something that Winchester shows us when we first get into SOAR, it's like Love Liberates by Maya Angelou. When I talk about building community and stuff, SOAR has provided me agency and to have this community to talk amongst other Black women to be like, okay, this is how I fit into the context of the world. And now let me go to these greater power structures and be like, yeah, no, that's not right. You who are in power have to start fixing these things. But I think you can't do that until you feel liberated from other Black folks. And even beyond that, I think right now in terms of conversations around defunding the police, there is a big divide within the Black community in terms of the younger generation and the older generation, and how much we allow ourselves to become radicalized and think in new ways. And so that's a lot of the work that we have to do internally in the Black community to then talk to bigger power structures to be like, this is what we believe cohesively as a Black community that we need to get towards liberation. And I think that's a lot of the work, because within the Black community, there's still so much that we haven't talked about in terms of, how do we start fixing these things structurally? And also just success, I think all of us just in conducting those conferences and this past summer with the passing of George Floyd, it was a bunch of SOAR students that created that 5,000 person march within the Evanston community, right? So and that led to influencing bigger power structures. The mayor reached out, the aldermen were creating all of this activism and mobilization in Evanston through that liberation of these, these women, essentially, these women of color. So it's exactly that through us, we gain liberation. Carmia is doing activism and poetry, and art in the park. There's so many different ways that we kind of can reach those power structures, but we can only do that through our collective liberation.
Thank you for owning Mother of Civilization.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, let me ask. Let me jump to a new question instead of bridge.
Quick follow-up on that.
Oh.
You speak about cohesive, but obviously, and you speak about how, Black people don't all agree because we're not a monolith, right? We all have different views. So how do we face that but move through it together?
I think part of it is thinking about revolution differently. Like, I think a lot of times when we think about revolution, we think about these big, powerful things. But I think like the majority of Black folks I know have been revolutionary on the most revolutionary person that comes to my mind is my grandmother, right? Because everybody's got to eat and everybody's got to have a house. Everybody's got to have a place to live and everybody's got to eat. That's like the center of it, right? Like, that's how we stay alive. And for generations, that was what my grandmother did. Open door policy. Hey, come get a plate of food. Hey, you need somewhere to stay? Like, let's stay here. And I feel like if you asked all of us in here, like, oh, do you have that one sibling or one family member who does that? Everybody be like, yeah, I could always go to so-and-so's house. But we don't think of that as revolutionary, right? And so I think when we center, like back to centering the conversation around Blackness and the structures, when we think about that love and that individuals are revolutionary within the Black intramural, like that conversation changes. Because like a lot of times we think of going back to something or going to something different instead of centering something that already exists. Like one of the most revolutionary things in Evanston, family-focused garden, communal garden. Every day people could come out, get some food and eat. Like, I think we need to center things that already exist, that were created by Black folks and are created for Black folks. And I think that's when we start to move forward as a collective, because all that is cohesiveness. You know what I'm saying?
Ooh.
You bring tears to my eyes and goosebumps to my skin.
Man.
Hey, that was good truth telling. So the word I want to introduce people to is this notion of acculturation, right? That is where you bring self, but you don't lose self. And so I think when we talk about centering, we need to give people language. The acculturation is really important. Kayla, I'm going to direct this to you, but anybody can answer afterwards. First, shout out and applaud. I think we talked about this a little bit on the test. You and others helped raise some money for Brother Jacob Blake.
Liana is like one of the original organizers.
Look at you, Liana. Well, congratulations to both of you, because I live in the town that Jacob Blake lives in now. And some of you may not know this, but that his father was my pastor, my family's pastor when I was there going to the Black Y, because there were two YMCAs back then. And I know Celeste, I know her mother very well. And so Kayla, I'm going to direct this to you because I had this long conversation with you last summer in the backyard of my sister's house during the 4th of July. And you told me for a good hour, I feel like I already knew where your journey was going to be. So here's the question that I want to ask, direct this to Kayla, but I think all of you can answer this question, is when you're thinking about SOAR and, okay, so now that you have the strength to know who you are, everything is centered, how are you holding each other accountable? And then how are you holding the body accountable called SOAR, right? And then what's the accountability look like outside of SOAR? Even to our white, our Latinx, and other friends. What does that look like?
Yeah, accountability in what way? Like,
well, so accountability, right, is you get it while you're in SOAR, right, for yourself. The question is then you get it as a group, right? Then there's a question of, how do you get that outside the circle of SOAR, because you have chosen to be equipped that way. I'm interested in how each of you are using that both to be accountable to one another and then accountable to your outside groups.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think like the language that SOAR uses that helps me is that you're not like in it, and so that you just kind of equip it with you and take it with you wherever you are, not just rather than like just in the group. And I think that helped me. I know I was having a conversation with someone who lives right outside of Indianapolis, and she goes to a school that it's just, it's different. And in a way that like it's a Christian school that just has a lot of things going on. And when we were having conversation, I brought a lot of the things that I learned from SOAR into that conversation. and she had to be like, back up, like, you know, like, hold on, let me, you know, understand. And I think what SOAR has helped me with in teaching me the languages that follow through with it is that, like, you know, the language in itself can be oppressive. And so taking the, you know, the roots of the language, like the meaning of it, and that, like, we don't have the language to express like what we need to express. So the creation of language is important as well. So like having that balance, you know, like I need this language because there's nothing else, but at the same time, I need to communicate this language to other folks, but this language is new, so not everybody's gonna understand it, you know what I'm saying? And so I think that part is a struggle, but that everybody has like different stories to connect with the language itself. Like I talked about my grandmother, she, the person I was talking to talks about like, oh yeah, in this instance, this happened. And so I think like stories connect that language because like the language is representing Blackness, but it's just new. You know what I'm saying?
I do. Practice. Others, I know Larissa has a follow-up. Others.
I think you could keep us all talking. So we're.
Okay. I wanted to make sure the others had a chance.
Yeah, I was gonna say, go ahead.
Sorry, you can go. Okay. I was going to say that for me, I definitely take a lot of like the stuff that I learned from SOAR to other places as well. And I want to tell like a small story about me being in Minnesota with my family. It was me and my mom and this white woman. My mom is also white. My dad's Black, my mom's white, so I'm mixed. And we were sitting with this lady because we were at like kind of like on the lake where there's kind of like a little bit of a camp, like people can rent Airbnb cabins, and we were staying in one cabin and random people from other places were staying in other cabins. So this lady and me and my mom were around the fire, and she's a poor white woman, so that's her background.
She's a what?
And a poor white woman.
Okay.
That's her background. And she starts asking us about race and saying, she basically asked me, I don't understand why like all this is going on in the world. Like I don't see people's color. Like I don't understand why people can't just be nice to everyone. And so it sparked a conversation. But what really helped me stay in that conversation and not really allow myself to get upset was kind of, I guess, trying to understand where she was coming from, and also trying to use SOAR's basically the concepts of a conversation within that conversation, because it's like always speak from your truth. I never brought in something like somebody else's experience into that conversation. It was always my experience and what I knew to be true. And then I always made sure she was hearing what I was saying. And it was actually a very interesting conversation, because I was telling her, I was like, you know, I think it's actually an insult to say that you don't see somebody's color, because I don't have that privilege. You know, like if I don't see my color, if my brother doesn't see his color, that can be very harmful to us.
Absolutely.
And by you saying that, that's also harmful as well. And I think that at the end of all of this, if we ever get to a perfect space, it's where everyone sees everyone's color, because my color is part of who I am. And so I was telling her, like, if you don't see my color, that's why I go to the store. You don't see me. I go to the store and I don't have any products for my hair. I go to the store, I don't have any products for my skin. I go to school, I don't have any products for where I came from. Like, that's what that is you don't see color, because like white people, I don't think they see themselves as a race. They see themselves as just people. And so, and everybody else has culture that comes along with their race. And white people kind of like took away everyone else's culture and subdued it. And so when it comes to talking about race and stuff, they always say, well, I don't see it. I don't like, of course, like, I'm not going to see you that way, but like, that's exactly who I am. And like, I think that it's really important to dig that up and find the value in that when in conversations with people of different races, is to, you know, like, we are all different. That doesn't make us not people. We all have the same value, but we have different things that come along with us. And it's important to recognize that.
Oh, speak, sister. That I just say that grounded identity is, and the shared experiences, right? Is if you know who you are and they know who you are, that's where the common ground comes from.
Yeah.
And until you are ready to seek common ground,
Yeah.
then I can help you. Back to be honest, that's a burden. If you're not looking for it, that's a burden. Yeah.
Oh.
Others, I don't want to leave them out. Any other reflections? Nora or Leanna? Yeah.
Yeah, I just going off of what Kayla and Carmia said, we're talking about how we're holding each other accountable. And the first thing I kind of thought of was a lot of times in the school setting, outside of SOAR, when we had normal school, we would have, SOAR lunch, we would all come and gather during lunchtime and have this really amazing, loving space. But sometimes for me, I would leave that space and then, I would be caught off guard in a classroom and someone would say something and I would be, whoa, like, that was racist. And I think SOAR has really taught me to slow down and stop and say, like, hey, like, what do you mean by that? And I think that is one of the biggest tools I've learned to use, is to just slow down the conversation and really allow someone else to reflect on how they're using language. And then also kind of going off of what Carmia said, I think I use this in my personal life. I'm also biracial. I'm someone who's Afro-Latina. So being two races who are, I'm not white, but sometimes one of my, extended family sides will say something that is prejudiced towards, my other race. And so I'll, again, use that kind of language and say whoa, what did you mean by that? What was the thinking behind, a microaggression or something you said?
So back again, I have another question, but I want to remind people that we are looking to raise funds here so that programs like SOAR can thrive and soar. Please text 76278 to Booster, or text Boosterpalooza to 76278. Remind us, and then I have another question. What does SOAR stand for? So for those who might have just come on.
Students Organized Against Racism.
And Carmia, you were speaking about our culture and not having a culture, but we do have a culture that's deep, that has been taken from us. It's been colonized. But here I'm looking at Nora's background, and Nora has a print of Billie Holiday. I look at TaRhonda's background, and she has people of color, Black people behind her. And this is something that we have very rarely seen. We go to stores. What are the posters? What are the people? What are the ads? What are the movies? What are the books? What are the conversations on TV when we see anything, right? So this is revolutionary. This is amazing, that we have choices, that when we go to a museum that we can see Barack and Michelle, that we have children who stand and get to see themselves. And so and I'm a fan, you were a fan of perhaps the presidency, what we see is so important. Camille, you're an artist, right? Spoken word, or do you create?
Yeah, I'm an actor. I sing and I act and do a little dance sometimes.
So representation, it's important, right? Seeing yourself.
Yes.
Be the first sometimes in spaces. That's
yes, very much so.
Tell us about that a little bit.
So,
yeah, I definitely think my whole entire life I've been telling white stories as an actor. Any story that I've told, between The Wizard of Oz, there's The Wiz, but we would do the traditional stories, and I never really thought about it because I was just doing theater. And for a long time, I didn't even know I was Black. I just hung out with the people I hung out with. And in second grade, I hung out with people who looked like me. And my friends were like, why are you hanging out with the Black people? And I was like, whoa. So I learned I was like, okay, this is a thing. But I also learned that I never played a main role when I was younger and I was acting. I always played a side role or I played a character that was the most intricate. And it was always interesting to me that I never got to lead the story, but it made sense because it was never my story to begin with. I didn't connect to any of those. And it was funny. I did a fundraiser over like in June this past summer, and there was a lot of the performances were meant to raise money for like Black owned businesses within Evanston, and a couple of like GoFundMe's and that stuff. And so we had, most of the performances were about like Black liberation, and then some of them were just about race and stuff going on. And one of the groups that was supposed to perform they were just going to perform like a sketch comedy thing, and it was all white people. And they came to me and they told me like, we don't have our stuff like completely prepared like the day of when we're rehearsing. They're like, we don't have our stuff prepared, like we don't feel comfortable, like there's all these people that have meaningful stuff to say, and we're just a bunch of white people performing in this, and it doesn't feel right. And it was like the day of, and they're supposed to perform it. I'm like, so why didn't you guys like think of something else to do, like a poem or something? Like think of something, because you committed to this, like you got to do it. And so they think a little bit, they come back to me and they're like, we just all don't feel comfortable, like we're all white and this is a Black Lives Matter fundraiser and whatever. And I said to them, I'm like, I've been a Black person performing in your white shows my entire life, and I'm not asking you to be something that you're not here. I'm not asking you to act Black here. I'm asking you to contribute to something that is beneficiary for this whole community. So it was interesting, and they didn't have anything to say after that. I'm like, you're telling me you feel uncomfortable performing in something that is pushing towards the liberation of Black people and the togetherness of this community through the Black Lives Matter movement because you're white, and yet I've been performing in white shows my entire life, and I'm not sitting here going, I don't feel comfortable with this because that's the only platform in which I can perform in. And so it was just interesting.
So Lori's asked a lot of our guests on Evanston Rules about the Black Lives Matter sign. Ben Blunt and Melissa Blunt's studio produced how many signs, Lori's?
They produced a lot, but they've been able to, in a number of years, get out 2,000 signs in a town of 70,000 people. Now, we recognize that a town of 70,000 people is in 70,000 homes.
So with what you just said about your friends feeling uncomfortable and you participating in performances that depict white people for all your life, what do you think about the Black Lives Matter signs? Do you think people are really meaning that, or do you think that is just a place for people to fake it?
I think that there are a certain number of people in this world that go which way the wind blows. And so I think that the movement has pushed itself so far that if you're on the other side, it's clear you're on the wrong side, and people are going to look against you. And so it's like, oh, let me get over here. So I'm part of something, right? So I think a lot of people are doing what they can do to look right and not actually acting right. That's what I see, because a lot of people who come out, there's like 5,000 people who came out to the Evanston Fight for Black Lives protest that Liana and her whole group set up, and yet there's not 5,000 people doing activism. So let me ask.
Can I add to that too? I also a friend of mine like mentioned to me, like, you drive through North Evanston, predominantly white areas, and you see more Black Lives Matter signs than perhaps Black people in the Evanston community, right? Like, affordable housing is a huge issue, and actually the population of Black people that can afford to live in Evanston is decreasing right now. And so I think there's this whole, essentially, especially in Evanston Fight for Black Lives, as we're pushing for, defunding the police and investing in brown and Black communities, you have all these people very willing to put up this Black Lives Matter flag and paint it and say that they support it, like the mayor, XYZ. our schools even. And when it push comes to shove, like they're not willing to take on, police forces and, the teachers that are doing really bad harm within ETHS, they're not willing to take those on. So to me, it's great, to have that, but like, it means so much more to me. One, as a white family, you're educating your white kids, so I don't have to do that job. And two, that, you're actually showing up and voting as an alderman, as a person in the community to invest in Black communities, right? And so I think that speaks, there's this huge term, performative activism, all this stuff. I think that's a big issue in Evanston, and it's something that like also needs to be addressed, that it's more than just showing that flag.
So a follow-up, right? What is the acting right? So if each of you could say, what is acting right? What would you tell white Evanston to do? And then what would you tell Black Evanston to do?
Well, I think it's like, it's not, when we talk about activism, especially in SOAR, right? There are so many different avenues, right? We have scientists, we have artists, we have future politicians, all of these avenues. And that's exactly what it is. Like, as a white person, I cannot tell you, you have to, read your literature and invest yourself in this like critical Black thought. But there's so many other things that you have to be doing. And like, I think that's the problem, that we try to say, okay, well, you shouldn't say the N-word and you shouldn't do these things, when in reality, Blackness was formed like out of this context and these experiences, which can't have like a yes or no, do this, do that. And so I think a lot of times, especially teachers, like they're like, okay, well, can I say this or can I not say that? And that comes through experience, through talking to Black people. Like a lot of, especially, white families, like they have one or two Black friends, but like they're not really authentic, real relationships with people of color. And so like, for me, there's no one thing that I can tell white folks to do. It in fact takes a lot of struggling, a lot of learning, like it's a journey. But I think it does involve a lot of reading, a lot of talking to people of color, a lot of decentering their voices and just stepping back. And then for Black folks, I think something that Lauren Davis, another amazing member at ETHS, said is this concept of all Black lives matter. Are we talking about trans Black, queer people? Are we talking about all these issues in the Black colorism? Are we talking about that in the Black community? And that's how, that's what I would tell Black folks. Like, we have our work to do as well, very much so, because we've been in this white culture that's just kind of ripped us apart for so long. And even in terms of like how we relate to other racial groups as well, like Latinx folks and Asian folks, like we have a lot of unlearning to do to kind of mend those connections, because history has just been told in this very white, Black binary, and that's just not the case. We've left out so many stories. And so, yeah, I like that complicated answer is how I would answer that, right? Like there is no one thing that you can do.
It's so important, I think.
Excuse me, Mike. Hello? Are you able to hear me? Can we also continue so that the other members can answer that same question? Because
I just want to paraphrase here just for a second. I think it's important to say this. If you are not having the conversation in your house, it is very hard to have it on your front door or your front porch, right? And in your neighborhood. So I think what you're saying to people is you have to really deal with your own personal self. Then you are equipped to have broader conversations, and it doesn't stop with just Black and brown, right? We have to, Black and white, we have to extend it. I think that's a really important point to make.
Oh, for sure. Because just to give context, like
hey, I want Mike to own that. Mike is saying that, and Mike, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I'm owning that. I'm reflecting on my new y'all inspired mind.
We can't hear you, Flores. We can't hear you real good.
Are you not able to hear me?
No, we're not able to hear you real good at all. When you try to get in, it doesn't sound right. All right.
Hold on one second. Are you able to hear me better now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's continue that question, because I think everybody probably has something to say about that. So
I mean, I just go back to, I don't know what I would tell white folks, to be honest. I mean, I probably wouldn't tell them anything, but but for Black folks, I'm taking this class right now, and it's an AFAM performing arts class, and it kind of goes back to the last question about representation, and Carmia was talking about theater as well. And I think one thing is like, somebody said it was a trailer article, and she was talking about theater, what Carmia was talking about. And she says that all American theater is Afro-American theater. And because everything prior to that was European. And so everything that is American theater has been based off of slave narrative, which means that everything is Afro-American theater, you know? And I think it goes beyond theater. And then when you get into like the exploitation of it and the commodification of it, that gets like, you know, like whitewashed and whatnot. But everything is connected to us. And then the second thing is that James Baldwin talks a bit about the artist. And he talks about how the artist has to share, like the artist's job, the Black artist's job is to share. And I think it goes back to language. And once again, I don't think we have the language to express humanism, and I don't think we have the language to express liberation and trauma either. And I think that the creation of that is important, which is art. And so art is creating that language. And so I would tell Black folks that, and art, not just like painting, not even acting, like anything we create is art at this point, you know what I'm saying? And so I would tell Black folks to keep creating and being creative, because I think it's the most essential thing to Blackness, because it creates language. Even if that language isn't spoken, it creates that language to express whatever needs to be expressed. Wow. And so I think that's what I would tell Black folks. I once again, I don't know what I'd tell white folks. Because the other thing is, she talks about like where whiteness fits into this. And I love this class. It taught me a new word, temenos. And it's like this barrier kind of created around language that lets you in as much as you need to be let in, but also keeps you out. You know what I'm saying? Like this intramural conversation. And I think that's important. The
word again, please.
Temenos. Yeah. And I think that's what art does as well. And I think like Black folks creating that allows us to have conversations that keeps people at bay, other folks at bay, but also like a way for us to communicate in a way that not everyone would understand. And so, yeah, I would say keep being creative, whichever avenue that is, you know.
Nora?
I was pretty much on the same wavelength as Kayla. I am someone who loves visual art. I consider myself a visual artist. And for Black folks, you know, I think I completely agree. And I think being able to express yourself, through any way possible is kind of what I have been able to do to feel like comfortable. And then, you know, what I hope others can't have the space to do and are given the space to do. Another thing I think I want to talk about is like intersectionality. So like hearing the stories of so many different identities in the Black community is something I wish I could tell every Black person, because, you know, I don't know, I guess it's just like all Black folks aren't liberated until we're all liberated, and like no one is invisible anymore. For white folks, you know, I wrote a few things down, you know. I think kind of as Kayla was also saying, you know, there's this huge commodification, I think, of Black art especially. And I think when you internalize and like think harder about, you know, why you're choosing to or who your art is coming from, or like the way you dress, you know, music you listen to, and like decentering yourself from it, and when you're not like taking away from someone else, I think, and you're changing the conversation about Blackness instead of, you know, saying, oh, well, you know, I'm this identity, I'm a woman, and like trying to match that to Blackness is, you know, I think something I wish I also could tell white people.
Carmia?
Yeah, I definitely think for starting off with white people, I'd say get uncomfortable. I think that most white people, 99% are just very comfortable in the world that we're in, and comfortable not knowing about all the bad things that have happened to people of color in this country. Just comfortable being where they are and sitting on their throne of privilege. And they need to be in spaces where they're uncomfortable, and they need to sit in that and be okay with that, because I think that's gonna stick for a long time. You're gonna be uncomfortable for a very long time, and that needs to be okay. So be okay with being uncomfortable is what I'd say, and seek diversity outside of your circle constantly in your life, because I think that a lot of white people surround themselves with like-minded white people, and that's where they continue the ignorance in their life.
Wow.
So
I find that that's one of the things that we noticed, or I noticed growing up, that when we were very young, there were groups that were much more integrated. And as we got older, people separated. And then as we've gotten older still, the one tie that people can say is, oh, we loved Earth, Wind, and Fire. So we were in it, you know, we danced, we were in it, you know. But I was thinking, hearing all of this and talking to you, and we thought that some of the difficulties that our people might face in learning or interest in learning is because we're not learning about ourselves. We never see ourselves. We don't read about ourselves. We don't have the conversations. We're not in the boardrooms often. And so we need to be able to do that, right? We need to be able to do that. And you all, including you, TaRhonda, you're doing that in such a strong and vibrant and important way. And I couldn't be more proud to be from Evanston and to be from ETHS when I see the work you're doing. And so if we could, you know, we have just a few more minutes. So if you could say what your hopes are, how you intend to keep doing this work, what does that look like?
I think just to kind of jump in and first, like, I'm just like, I don't even have words to speak after, like, you know, after like just hearing from, you know, just these wonderful people. And I think that, I think we often discredit the ways in which students are really thinking about, and kids and young folks and young adults are really thinking about and really internalizing and really personally interrogating these types of conversations in this very true and authentic and beautiful ways. I think it's very important for us as adults, especially to center student voice and center young folks' voice and make space for them to have these types of dialogues and conversations. I think for me, I think it's very imperative that we center Black joy. And it's very critical for social movement and social power that we really make space for Black joy to live and to be pervasive in any and all of these spaces that exist. And until we start to center Black joy, we will never see the full humanity of Blackness. And I think I talked about this a little bit earlier. And I think in centering Black joy, regardless of like what your role is as an administrator, educator, parent, whatever your role is in community, it's important for you to recognize your place in centering Black joy and how you challenge oppressive systems and the voice in which you give Black joy in these spaces. And until we truly do that, regardless of it being, I know we talked a lot about allyships and these kind of like ungenuine, like kind of stamps of approval. I think that we really, Bettina Love is the author that an intellectual that I really have been like really resonating with lately. And she talks a lot about this idea that, you know, moving from allyship to co-conspirators, like we need folks to really step up and really push against and speak up for what is actually happening in these spaces. We cannot be silent any longer, you know. And I think that having the, you know, giving these students really showing the agency of having voice and how voice can be pervasive in all these different spaces. I think this is kind of speaks to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. How do we reach folks who are not having these conversations or are left out of these conversations? We light the torches of these young folks and give them the power and agency to just shine. Like they just, it's just something that I think this work truly pushes beyond what could exist. It's reimagining how this work can be done and really giving ownership to folks who we've left out of these conversations. Young folks have been left out of these conversations.
I also want to say one more thing. You know, for those who see us as all the same, I hope that by listening here today, that they can hear how different our voices are, how you each have points of view that while they overlap, you have your own spaces, your own views. You know, we are rich, we are diverse within ourselves. We are brilliant, and you all have just brought it in such an amazing way. And I'm going to say that for those who are listening, this is what you're supporting. When you give, you are supporting SOAR, you are supporting Liana, you are supporting Nora, you are supporting Kayla, you are supporting Carmia, you are supporting those that they speak to and where they take this in their lives, because it's part of their DNA. It is part of our DNA. And we have to recognize this. I applaud you all, and I'm going to do this piece where I'm just going to say, give, support, and not just give money, but open your ears. When people tell you how they feel, when Black folks tell you there's a problem, listen to us. When Black folks tell you it's good, you can listen to us too. It's not that we're just coming with problems, you know, but we have had 400 years of people not listening to us. And it's time, and you all are the changers. And I am proud. So here we go. Text.
Yeah, I think we're at 2,300, right? Are we at?
I'm not sure, but 2,300 isn't enough for what we just did. Okay. Yeah. 76278. And let me just say this. We'd love you to give now. You can give later. You can give tomorrow. You can give next week. Give.
And I'm going to say, don't be afraid of the change. Embrace the change. Here's your opportunity for fairness. I want to ask.
Hey, Ron, before you let me say one quick thing, because
Yep.
I just want to say, because you may have to drop off. One, I love the fresh perspective and the fresh water. We will not get there until your voices are heard and lifted up. So I just want to say that. The other is I would say before Ms. Woods, you know, there'd be some good consideration to when you reimagine is to invite parents. Have a SOAR parents group. And let us alumni help you support that. Okay, Ron.
Yep. So, Kayla, I think you mentioned this word 5 times over the last hour: trauma. Right, and I don't think we have an opportunity or have had an opportunity to kind of unpack that, right? And when we talk about cognitive dissonance, right, from the Black perspective and the white perspective, we've all experienced a trauma, right? I want, if you could, all of you young ladies, you beautiful, Black, strong, vibrant, remarkable sisters, I want you to speak to that trauma that we as a Black community experience. But I also want you to speak to the trauma that the white community has experienced.
I think everybody will talk about like the trauma Black folks experience, because it's like so right there. I think right now we're studying minstrel shows, and somebody that was commentating on it said, you have to, he just says it just like this, you have to degrade us in order for you to deal with the fact that slavery happened. And I think that's like white folks traumatized. And I would take it a step further, maybe that like the degradation comes from, there's a James Baldwin quote that says like, if you lied to me about who I am, then you must have lied to yourself about who you are. And I think that like,
wait, say that one more time.
Yeah, that is.
And say it slow, right? And again, I just want to set up for the people that are listening. Here's the piece where you may feel uncomfortable. Embrace it like a SOAR student, address it like a SOAR student, learn like a SOAR student, and change like a SOAR student. Say that one more time.
Yeah, if you lied to me about who I am, then you must have lied to yourself about who you are. And I think that when we look at blackness and whiteness, rather than saying like, oh, like white folks got this and black folks got this. Like if we look at them as informing each other, like blackness informs who white folks are, like what white identity is, then I think we can start to understand like the degradation of it. Like, oh, not rather than I degrade you because I think you're less than, like I am degrading you in everything that I do because I have to keep you. I have to sustain this image of you in order to sustain an image of myself. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's like white folks traumatized at the greatest. And I think that's why that tango keeps, not even a tango, keeps happening.
And to go off of that too really quick, I wanted to say like that also, like I think white people's biggest identity is white privilege. And like, I think that that's genuinely painful. I think it's painful to uphold a system that oppresses so many people. And I say like, it's so painful to have someone be racist against you. Like for the person who's experiencing that racism, that is so painful. But like, it is also so painful and hurtful to white people for them to hold that within themselves too. Like it takes a lot of work to hate somebody and to hurt somebody in the way that whiteness and like that is like, I don't know, I feel like it's hurting themselves to hurt us. And so it's not just like we're being hurt, it's like a collective hurt. And that's the reason we're being hurt, is because they're hurt. Like it's like hurting themselves to hurt us at the same time. And I don't think it's something that's genuinely joyous. I mean, on the outside, it's like, oh, I like doing this, but it's like that is hurting you. And I don't think a lot of people see it either.
Well, they choose not to. They choose not to. It is a choice that people have made for so long.
Yes.
They believe that it's something that they cannot do. We're done with that. I don't want to cut you off. I absolutely want to have you all back if you would be willing to come and do the podcast, and we can record that. But we want to offer the audience to come on and with any questions you might have that we can relay to the SOAR members, because as we know, these people have a lot of important things to say and a lot of important opinions, and it's time that we listen.
Yeah.
Anyone have anything that they'd like to?
I'm watching the feed too, and I know Evan is back there.
And I'm getting back to give now.
Yeah, I want us to be conscious of ending on trauma. And I think that for so long, like Black folks have been conditioned to end with trauma. And I don't want us to end this conversation like focusing on Black trauma, and really create space to talk about liberation and talk about joy and center those types of conversation, because I think that for so long it's become exhausting to end on trauma, to begin with trauma, to have trauma exist within the spaces that we are in. So I think it's important for us to recognize that yes, trauma has happened. Yes, trauma continues to happen, but not center and end on trauma. So I really want to make sense of that.
And as we sit here, we see the power in this room. We see the power in these rooms. We see the bright lights. We see people going out who are doing art, who are acting, who are performing, who are making differences. And we can do this around the world.
My neighbor Louise, who is an ETHS student, is texting me talking about how, and she's part of Talking Whiteness, and she's texting about how much she loves her classmates. And that type of humility and that type of support is unbelievable. So again, you are some powerful sisters, and y'all have an adopted father anytime y'all need it.
I just want to learn. And, this is the incredible thing is, sometimes in our age range, we forget, we think we have so much to teach. But if we just open our ears, Black, white, Asian, Latinx, Middle Eastern, Arabic, we have a lot to learn. And so just sitting here and hearing you, I have
gotten so much more out of this conversation than any question I might have asked you. It's the way that you've answered and what you bring. And I can only imagine that you bring this with you wherever you go. They say,
Yes.
that saying, you take yourself with you wherever you go. And you all should be so proud to be who you are. And I can't imagine you're anything but. And I see TaRhonda here, and I feel exactly the same way. I am honored to have been a part of this conversation.
Yeah.
It will stay with me, and you're teaching people wherever you go, and that is a gift.
Absolutely.
That is a gift. That you could have a conversation, Carmia, and not lose your cool when someone says that to you. And because what we do find is the people who say, things about not seeing race, I'm going to tell you, I've never had a Black person say it to me. So keep doing what you're doing. Do we have any questions, Mike?
That's it. Hold on. Oh, well, I think we have one here. How do these outstanding students see carrying their efforts over to college for those who are on the campus?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I mean, it sucks because I know, Kayla, I mean, like, we're in Evanston, the pandemic is kind of messing it up. For the time that I was on Georgetown's campus, I joined Black Movements Dance Theater Company, and talking about like ending on liberation, like dance, music, art, like that has been at spoken word, my source of liberation, my way of telling our story and the way that I've experienced it. And that of my grandmothers, my aunties, like that is what Black liberation is to me. So that's how I've continued it on at Georgetown's campus. I'm also part of our NAACP chapter. I'm the Student of Color Association rep. So that's happening this year. Evanston Fight for Black Lives. I mean, like, even though I'm at Georgetown, like Evanston is my home. So I'm not able to continue that right now because I'm doing 6 classes, 18 credits, but I have a community of folks, Kayla, amazing people that are continuing on this work right here in Evanston. So yeah, it's, like I said in the beginning, it's agency, and the fact that, like, I know wherever I go, I'm a student in the business school, but like that capacity for me to take up that space, to be that one Black woman in the room, even though I am that one, like that's what, how I've continued on, and like the liberation of being like, I have the power to take space in this room. I deserve to be here. Like that's how I've continued on what SOAR has taught me.
Let me ask you this: at Georgetown, are you the one Black woman in the room?
Yes, absolutely. What's amazing, there's a lot of really powerful Black women in the business school specifically that I know. But accounting, all these classes, I'm sitting there, I'm like, yep, it's me in here, cool. And I mean, like maybe one, Indian friend that I have. But in terms of Blackness, like I could very well be the one Black woman, and I'm taking up that space, right? Like,
and it's an important space to take up. And just you being there, just like seeing a painting of Michelle Obama, people seeing you in there makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's right.
Keep doing it. Keep
Hey,
doing it.
Also have
we got a few more minutes, right?
We got another question or no?
I don't see questions. We got a few more minutes. Let me also give a shout out to Kim Dietz and Kara Mann, who are the co-sponsors of this ETHS Boosterpalooza. We do want to break the bank on this. I think we're somewhere close to 2,500. Let's just make sure people know that they can continue to give. I think Maurice mentioned that earlier. And the text to give is the Boosterpalooza, ETHS Boosterpalooza 76728. You can still give. You can jump on that website. Don't forget to give. And yes, you can tell folks to expand SOAR.
Say give as they say in Chicago about voting, but we're going to say about ETHS and giving to this Boosterpalooza. Give early and give often.
Yeah, give to it hurts. Give to it hurts. That's right. Make it change. Well, ladies, keep leaning in. Your voices are so important now and in the future. You are the future. So I would say just keep leaning in and keep. I think we would say consider your Evanston Rules family also part of your support and cover. As you push forward, right? We'll keep trying to help support you. Any else, Larisse, as we...
Bonnie, do you have anything?
Again, Ms. Wood, I got to give you a shout out. When we first talked to you a couple of days ago, I'm just so humbled and impressed by your power, your strength, and your brilliance. And then to again talk to you beautiful young Black women, and to hear your strength and your voice, you do your ancestors proud.
Yeah.
So keep paying it forward. Promise to be unafraid, and always tell your truth.
Yeah.
By any means necessary.
That's right. That's right. Ms. Woods, do you have any final words? Anything? I know your intellectual homie, Mr. Corey Winchester, helped too. So we want to make sure we give a shout out to Mr. Teacher of the Year.
I gotta shout out my intellectual homie. You're right. Well, that's what we are. We intellectual homies. No, Corey has been doing this work for a very long time, and I have just been honored and blessed to work with Corey. You know, when I first got to ETHS, he was one of the first people of color that I came in contact with, that I had one of those truth moments with, and I think that he really does. This work is so engraved in like who he is as a person, that it really does make it it just makes it a beautiful like journey just to be on with someone that is so passionate about this work. And I think that he does a great job of, you know, centering student voice and creating space for students, and just opening up, you know, his door to make sure that students know that they have a place and someone there, you know, to go on this exhausting journey with, because we know that this is all exhausting, you know. But he really does center, you know, radical love, and like really making sure that this journey is centered in love. And I've been blessed to like have, you know, takes a little bit of his space up, you know. But I really do want to create space for him, because I think that he really does speak to a lot of the work that has been done in SOAR in particular.
Well, bravo.
Can we get a closing word from the young sisters, each of them?
Yes, that's a great way to close out. Thank you.
I'll close with one. I'll say love liberates, and I thank Liana for bringing that in, because this work has to be centered in love.
Liana?
Back to Miss Woods, love liberates.
Nora?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think this was really just, I'm so happy to be in y'all's presence, and just, especially on this gloomy day in Chicago, it gives me so much warmth. So much love to all of you.
Thank you.
Nora?
Yeah, I think Ms. Woods took the words right out of my mouth. If anyone wants to check that out, it's Love Liberates by Maya Angelou, this beautiful video she has. But I just want to thank you all for letting me come on and speak my truth.
I'll use my moment to shout out Ms. Woods, because Ms. Woods, she knows that I love her. But I think when you talk about like love liberating and radical love, I think like Ms. Woods does a lot of that within SOAR, and like it's the base of that. So I would use love liberates, but yeah, shout out to Ms. Woods, and thank you for having us, for sure.
Yep. Camilla?
Yeah, Kayla just spoke. Carmia?
Yeah.
I say do whatever completes your soul. Soul completion is the way that you should go about your life, and love liberates. That's my favorite thing to say as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, you bet. Hey, thank you, sisters. Yeah, to all. Hey, stay on the feed. Make sure you are staying on. There's lots of entertainment later in the day. To Max Shapiro, no, we're not celebrating White Sox. This is a Cubs day. But I would say stay on. We are very thankful and appreciative to my co-inspirers. Listen to the podcast because not only we have these students, but there's lots of truth telling that is on that podcast. Thank you all.
Wait, I've got one more. Because
Okay.
we are doing Love Liberates, I'm going to read it here for everyone real quickly. Love liberates. It doesn't just hold. That's just ego. Love liberates. It doesn't bind. Love says, I love you. I love you if you're in China. I love you if you're across town. I love you if you're in Harlem. I love you. I would like to be near you. I'd like to have your arms around me. I'd like to hear your voice in my ear, but that's not possible now. So I love you. Go. Dr. Maya Angelou.
Yeah. Orange and blue.
Y'all.
Orange and blue forever. Orange and blue. Yeah, we got to put it on, right? Orange and blue forever. Let's stay connected.
There you go. There you go. Thanks, guys.
Bye. We will fight for you.
Yeah,
There
that's
you
right.
go.
Yeah,
Bye, everyone.
Bye.